So anytime that I go to a wedding, you know, you'll see like the little advice boxes that they have sitting there. And I don't write a whole lot of advice on there. The only thing that I write is marriage, consistency, being intentional equals hard work.
Mm-hmm. That is so true.
Because really, that is the best advice you can give anyone. Because not going to sleep mad, well,
How many times?
I don't feel that that's good advice. It is good advice. And I have done that. I have, you know, made sure that we didn't go earlier in my marriage. But let's be honest. I mean, and I'm speaking for myself and my experience. I've got up the next day and continued my argument, you know, because I wasn't done with it, you know. So I feel like that, you know, you have to work. You have to work. Like, I can't emphasize that enough, that you have to be intentional every day with something. You know, even if you're in a really bad place in your marriage, getting up and trying.
Yeah.
Like I think I said before, you know what? Compliment, find one thing. If he is doing 2 million things wrong, that he or she is doing one thing right, compliment that one thing. Build their confidence, and even when you're mad, and that's hard to do.
Right.
That is so hard to do when you don't even want to look at that person, and you do everything to avoid your spouse because you're just not in a good place. But at the end of the day, you have to decide, do I want my marriage to work? Am I willing to work at this? Or is this something that I'm willing to let go? Even with all the things I don't like about him right now, am I willing to see this? Because if you don't begin to work on it together, you're not going to have a marriage long.
Right.
Because one or both of you are going to check out and be, I'm done.
Right.
I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. So I think it's very important that even in our bad places, even in our bad seasons, that we come together at some point and have those hard conversations. Because if you even want it to work a little bit and I want it to work a little bit, we've got something.
That's something.
That's mustard seed faith.
Yeah, mustard
We've
seed
got
faith,
something. We've got something to build on.
Yeah.
But it's when you don't talk about it and things fester
Right.
and fester and fester, and every day you're thinking about this,
Yeah.
you're going to have a huge explosion at some point.
Yeah, because it builds up bitterness
Yes.
and resentment.
And
And
not
yes.
only when we kind of like let it go to that point.
Right,
And like I was telling you earlier, it takes a lot of courage
right.
to do any of the steps that you
Yes.
mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
because not everybody is at a good state in your
Right.
marriage.
Right.
So it sounds so easy, you know, like what you said, and maybe people listening, they might be, oh yeah, it's so easy for you, but how about me?
Right.
My relationship right now, I don't even feel like looking at my husband
Right.
in the eyes.
Yes.
So it takes a lot of courage and desire to make it work. And like you said, if you want to make it work a little bit and he wants to make it work a little bit, that's something we can start
Right.
with one little step,
Right.
and it goes from there.
Yes, that's something to build on, because there's so many other things that are underlining to get you to that good spot. I mean, if you really want to dissect marriage, there is so many tiny pieces just to put together to get to this step or that step. And so you've got to have willingness, and you've got to be willing to have an open mind, because what your marriage used to be is probably not what your marriage is in this season. And if you're carrying over those expectations of your previous season, that's not going to work in your current season, because you could have had a really good marriage and then one little bitty thing could have went wrong. And it could destroy every bit of trust, every bit of faith that you had in your spouse. Well, guess what? Your marriage just completely changed. Your foundation just got rot, and your foundation just got some cracks in it. So therefore, you're not going to have this whole piece of foundation that had all these perfections in it and didn't have any cracks. So you're going to have to start learning how to build your marriage from where you're at,
Right.
and not where you've been. And I think a lot of times too, like a lot of marriages, their spouses were not pure when they got married. And I think a lot of times, like things that we can bring from our past, it brings shame, it brings resentment into our marriage. And so we have to be careful to know that, you know what, when we get the Holy Ghost and when we're saved, that, you know what, 1 minute, 1 second, we're not, but in the other we are. 2 seconds apart,
Right.
but our life has changed. We have all of this, you know, sin and all this shame, but the moment that God saves us, guess what? That's gone. God covered it all. And it's the same way in our marriage. We have to learn to build where we are if we have hills and valleys in our marriage. And it's okay. And, you know, it's okay to start over. You know, it's okay to start from a new point.
Right.
You know?
You know what? It's so, everything that you have shared and that you've been talking about, it all goes back to the covenant relationship that you make with your partner. But not only are you making that covenant relationship with your partner, but you're making it with God. And so if God ordained that marriage, your trust is in God to work those things out. And a lot of people, you know, biblical is wonderful, but the practical steps that we are giving you, try it. You know, try what works for you, apply it to your life, and keep going. Like, say, for instance, you had touched bases earlier. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I wish my marriage was like yours. Well, a lot of times you don't know what they had to go through to get to that point. I remember a young lady, she had came up to George and I, and she was like, oh my goodness, Sister Harris, I want my marriage to be just like yours. This was our 5th year in marriage, and we had just been in the office with the pastor saying we wanted to get a divorce. And I'm looking at her like, no, you don't. You want yours to be better than mine. So we have to be careful, because what you see on the outside is not always what's going on the inside. You pray that your marriage is in the will, that your marriage is in God's will. You know, you want everything to be lined up according to the will of God. And then remember, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, to death do us part. Okay, so you took those covenant vows. So when the issue hit, when the storm hits, apply it. Be still and be like, okay, Lord, I love this man. This is the man that you designed for my life. But the thing of it is, it's like you have to be in the right place to have that mindset. This man or this woman was ordained specifically for me. And so I love him. And the thing of it is, don't take it so personal when your spouse make a mistake. And I think that's where we mess up. It's like, when they make that mistake, it's like we want to shun them or we want to push them to the side. Or, well, how dare they do that to me or whatever. But if you ultimately have your spouse's best interest at heart, you would be able to empathize and you would be able to forgive, because God forgives us. We're going to make mistakes over and over and over, and God forgives us. So we should forgive our spouse in the same way. And I want you all to take some time. Whenever there's an issue that arises, you should even do it before. On a piece of paper, write down the things that your spouse has done for you that's been very, very good. And then the bad things. 9 times out of 10, the good is going to be better than the bad. And that's what you lean on, and God can make it better. But you have to put the work in. You know, you have to communicate. You cannot build that wall. That's the enemy's desire, is to have you to build up that wall to cause division so you won't grow and prosper. But marriage is work. What you put in is like a bank account, you know, as far as investing. What you put in, it's almost what you're going to get out. If you don't put nothing in, you're not going to get any additional money out. You know, you got to really be intentional about building, you know, and pouring into it.
That's so true. One thing I wanted to touch on, I think, Kristy, you mentioned it also. Sometimes, whatever we went through, in our past life, we didn't come to God pure or whatever, those things can affect you mentally, emotionally, whether it was abuse or anything, whatever you've done before you come into Christ, it affects you. And sometimes you don't deal with it because of your shame. You push it away, you repress it deep down inside, and you don't deal with it. But it does manifest itself in your marriage. So that's something you have to come to terms with. And sometimes these things come up over time. Everything doesn't come up at the same time. Sometimes something happens and you get triggered. That happened to me recently. We were in New York and my husband was playing around with me, and we came on the bed or whatever, and it just took me back to a dark place immediately. And he saw the change in my face, and he was just playing around. He didn't mean anything by it. He was loving on me, but it took me to a dark place and gave me flashbacks of something that wasn't pleasant that happened. And I had to deal with those emotions, and I had to deal with that hurt and that pain and apologize to him. But we had to work through that together. So those things are going to come up. If you've had some scarring, some wounds, or whatever it is from your past, don't be afraid to share that with your spouse. Let them know about those things. Be honest, be open. And sometimes you may not even have the right words to explain how you're feeling. You might need a moment. Let them know that. Honey, I'm dealing with something right now. I just need to gather my thoughts or my feelings. I'm not trying to take anything out of you, but something is uncomfortable for me. And I just need to deal with that. And then you come back to them when it's a good time. Moments later, an hour later, or maybe the next day, and you discuss that thing, whatever it is, wherever you are, and let them know, this is something I need to work on. This is something that is uncomfortable for me. I'm thinking it's because of this or that or whatever, and just talk it out and work through it through prayer and fasting.
You know what? Touching bases on what you just said in regards to the abuse, that's where understanding comes in. And empathizing with your spouse. I was raped, and because I was raped, it had an effect on my marriage. You know how sometimes some men want to touch in the middle of the night, and I'm like, oh no, George, don't do that, because that brought back up the time when I was raped. And I thank God that he understood. He understood, and he worked with me until I was able to get past that phase. And so your marriage can be a beautiful thing, even if those things in the past has happened. All you have to do is communicate and take baby steps. Really be intentional about being there for your spouse, because when things like that happen, they're confused too. And it's hard on them because they want to please you, but they can't please you because they're thinking about what has happened to them in the past. And so it's so much going on in their mind at that moment that can cause so much confusion, in the marriage. And then the anger may come out towards you when it really isn't towards you. It's like you really, with marriage, you really, really, really have to have patience, and the love is unconditional, but you really, really have to be intentional about sitting down and understanding and working through. You can't be quiet. You cannot be quiet. The silence have to be broken, because your spouse cannot read your mind.
That's exactly what I was saying.
They cannot read your mind. No. And it's not fair to them. If they don't know what's going on with you, it's not fair to them, to get the brunt of your emotions. Sometimes it can be anger. It's not fair if they don't know what's going on, if they don't know how to handle it. And then once they find out that there is something going on within you, maybe you two, within you, the both of you are together, go to counseling, because if you don't know how to work through that particular issue, if you don't know how to help your spouse with that issue, go to marriage counseling. Find a Christian marriage counselor that you know that you can confide in and trust. And seek guidance.
Definitely.
And I don't know if this counts as counseling, but this week it was so funny because sometimes it's hard to open up. It's like you don't know how to say things. And my husband continuously, he tells me, I need you in the bed. Like I miss you when you're not in the bed. Now that I have my own business, sometimes I have to stay up late, at least 1 or 2 nights a week. And we have discussed this. But he still struggles with that. And the other day he called me and I was working. He called me, he was getting out of work. I'm a coach. So for some reason, I started to talk to him like a coach. I answered the phone. I answered the phone like, this is Coach Jamie. How can I help you? So my husband goes, oh, I want to talk to a coach. And I would like to discuss something that is going on in my marriage. And he opened up.
Right.
Like I was speaking like, role play.
Yeah.
It actually works for that. And he started saying, well, I have a problem because sometimes my wife doesn't go to sleep when I go to sleep. And I need her to touch and do whatever, and she's not there. And I'm like, okay, sir, but have you had a conversation or a communication? Like, why isn't she there? Do you understand the reasoning behind it? And we just started going back and forth. He opened up and he continued to explain that he wants me by him every night.
Yeah.
But then me as a coach, I started saying, maybe, sir, you're not understanding that she has, some things that have to be taken care of right away. Maybe you need to discuss that. You need to have communication. No. She needs to understand. So he was talking to me. Long story short is, role play might help too.
Oh, yeah.
To have some counseling in it. Play it as a coach, as a, but open up, speak up. And you know what? That day, he said it again. He reminded me. So now I'm being more mindful. Yeah. Like he kind of like nudged me and say, Jamie, let's, I don't like it when you're not in bed. So I'm trying to be more mindful about that this week, especially. I've been like, okay, so I'm making sure that I'm in bed. Really good. And it helps. Right. So it's just little tricks and things that we can do to make it work if we want to.
I agree.
Yeah. That's so awesome. This has been so good. I mean, I think we could just keep on talking about these things, but we have had a lot. I don't know. This is what, 4 maybe episodes.
And I think this just will help the ones that don't have it all together or it's not being perfect for them, because we understand. We try to be positive and bring positive solutions. That doesn't mean that we are in a world of Alice and how you say, in the wonderful wonderland. Right. It's not everything is rainbows and butterflies. Yes, we go through it. But you know what? It has worked for us in the moment that we needed it. So that's why we're sharing. And yes, if everything is not perfect for you right now, well, let's try. Let's try to make it work because it's work. Eventually, our kids are going to leave the home, the nest. And who are we going to have by our side when we're old and alone? It will be beautiful just to have that man that we have shared so many years and be able to hold hands and maybe kiss and the teeth just falling off.
Yes, it's all right.
That special person by our side when possibly nobody else is there.
And the one that has been with us through it all.
Right.
That loved us in the moments when we wasn't our prettiest or dolled up or we were going through, our hard times. The one that stood beside us and encouraged us and helped us.
Right.
And the same for us, But I think if you have a spouse that encourages you, you encourage them. Pay it forward. It's a bouncing ball.
Right.
You just keep hitting the ball back and forth in each other's court. And you grow, even one of the things that we had talked about on one of the episodes when we were talking about the weekly heart touch, I had mentioned that we journal. Well, one of the things that is another benefit of journaling is that you can go back and see how far you've grown.
That's good.
That's so awesome.
Because you can see like, here's our starting point. We started here. Wow, look how far we've come. We've come through all of this, and look how much stronger our marriage, our relationship, our communication, our intent
Right.
You know, because I think it was you that had told me if you do something for 21 days, it becomes a habit.
Yes.
Okay, you sit with your spouse, you know, a few minutes. I mean, and for a lot of people, what is a 15-second kiss for me and my husband could be just, it may be hard for you to sit down and just be like, well, how was your day? And you might even do that with a little attitude. You know, you may not even be ready for even having that conversation. But putting forth that effort, just a little bit every day, will create and build something quicker and faster than what you think. So, you know, just a nugget for keeping your journal, you know, close, because it serves many benefits. Because when you live life and you're working at something every single day, sometimes you don't see a daily change or a daily result. But when you go back and look at where we started, you can see how much you've actually grown.
And we have to keep in mind too that strong families, strong marriages, and strong churches.
Absolutely.
So, and that's the goal. You know, we want to be able to have a strong church that we're able to spread the gospel, the word of God, and we need to be strong for that. You know, in a world like it is today, we need strong families, we need strong marriages, so that as a church we can create a big impact, because people need it out there.
Right, and our children need that. Our children need that, because they're the next generation.
Yes.
And so they need to have, like I think Sister Denise talked about it, they need to have that example, you know, set in front of them, you know, to where they know what a godly home looks like, you know, and how love should be expressed, and, you know, what just true love. Because my kids are so loving, like they love to just come up and hug me, and I hug them, you know, but it's because they see their father, how loving and caring he is. But he's not only loving and caring to me, he's loving and caring to our daughters.
Right.
And he has set this standard in front of our son Kingston, to where if Kingston's not, or if Jamie's not even with me, Kingston opens my door. Not because he's been taught, but he's been set that example. So they learn and they watch from what has been in front of them. So,
And you know what? Allow your kids to tell you, get a room.
oh yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah.
I hear that from Amy and Johan all the time. Ew, get a room.
Yes.
You know what?
Like,
It's
ew,
okay.
mommy, daddy.
It's okay. That's right. They need to see it.
That's so true.
Yeah.
They need to see us model for them what a healthy marriage should be. And even if it wasn't always healthy, them seeing it ending the right way is the best gift you can give them for life, because they're all going to go out there in the world and experience relationships for themselves. So we want to show them the best. So people out there, don't give up. Don't give up. Keep on trying, keep on pressing, keep on praying and fasting, and I promise you, only good things will come to you. We want to thank Kristy so much for coming. You have been such a remarkable blessing. We have such great content, and thank you so much. All the things that you have given to us today, nuggets for life. I love it. I love it, and I'm going to start implementing them. I know these ladies are going to do it as well.
Sure.
So we thank you all for joining us for, I think, our final episode. We'll see. We might bring it back another time. Who knows? But for now, we thank you. And we are
Girl, change your clothes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.